Good morning, day traders, and welcome to Market Minute, a hedge fund trader's technical analysis for Thursday, April 7th, 2022. Let's get after it. So a little bit of some challenging conditions here today as we sort of await a little bit of some kind of Fed speak here today, right? So this should slow things down quite a bit as sort of this morning action kind of Fed officials want to be celebrities here today, right? We always talk about how high volume indecision is sort of the worst decision, and that's exactly what we got there yesterday with that sort of high volume doji here on the SPY. We need a little bit of a chart reset here or a little bit more information to sort of get that directional clue going here again today. So very hard to be bullish, very hard to be bearish, although maybe a slight bearish bias under that 443.50. Similar narrative here on QQQ with that little failed breakdown plus red hammer plus that increasing volume. So not a super good candle, right? Not exactly an indication here that bulls are back in control. Not exactly an indication that bears have fully given up control. So it's a little bit of an inconsistent narrative here again after sort of yesterday's big sell-off. If this thing can break down under this 350, if this thing can kind of give us that follow through, sure, there's a little bit of room towards that 345. But by the time we sort of make that breakdown here today, probably out of momentum and out of juice. So we need to be a little bit cautious with this thing here. Apple, right? Kind of giving us that high volume indecision, right? So high volume indecision is the worst decision, right? So high volume doji, not exactly a gap up, not exactly a gap down, with no real indication of who is in control here. So we'd like to see a little bit of a chart reset, right? We'd like to see a little bit of a sort of a bounce, right? Maybe see sort of bulls kind of give us that bullish engulfing candle, right? See some sort of high volume profile, right? Give me that sort of back-to-back increasing volume bars. We can have a little bit of an easier story here today. If this Apple can break down under this 169.90, certainly starts to get interesting towards that 169, 168, 167 target. Potentially, we could look to sort of fill this gap through this 173, right, 70 towards that 174.50. But I'm not sure if we're going to get that right risk reward profile. And again, right, same thing we talked about that QQQ to the downside. By the time it makes this move, right, it's already moved 3, 4, 5%. So hard to look at this and say, it's going to have those legs or that opportunity to kind of give us that big follow through up and over. Tesla, right, kind of filled that gap here to the downside and then was defended by bulls. So that's why we kind of saw that decent volume step in, but still a relatively, chunky body here, right? Now we're gapping up a little bit, and so we're still sort of in play with the sort of bullish momentum that we've had over the last couple of days, but yesterday's volume profile makes this just a little bit nervy, right? If we had that sort of decreasing daily volume, then we could look at this as that sort of low vol pullback, right? And that real big indication of this sort of being weak bears. But we don't really have that formal sort of candlestick profile here. So we need to still be a little bit cautious and hard to be bullish until that 1151 breaks. Microsoft, right, maybe the best setup or best looking one here to the downside. And that's a little bit of a, it's still a little bit of a compromise, right? Still maybe the best looking candle, right? Fullest of bodies, but if we go candle arrows, right, it's still sort of got that bullish pressure on the way up. So, not quite that second most bearish candle, right? Or normal body bearish candle that we're looking at, right? Sort of a mix between this normal body bearish and this least bearish, which isn't exactly that huge sign of relative strength that we're looking for. That being said, right, we've lost sort of a psych level. We've kind of had a weak candle, right, on strong volume. So there's a little bit to like here to the downside if you can give us that follow through under this 296.50, right, 296.60 area. That has room down towards that 295, 293, and then eventually that 290 zone. But same thing, right, by the time it breaks there, maybe need to be a little bit cautious on this thing sort of pulling back and breaking down. We'd want to look to enter here at the stop loss instead of maybe chasing any break and hold. AMD, right, high volume indecision is the worst decision here, where it's not really giving us that follow through this sort of trend line. Maybe it wants to sort of come back and test this 107.20 before it breaks down again, but really hard for us to be bullish or bearish here in the short term. Needs a little bit of a chart reset, needs a little bit of more information before I'm super convinced that this thing is ready to sort of break and go. Now we could sort of readjust this sort of wedge pattern here, right, for these points of contacts 1, 2, 3. But I'm still interested in kind of respecting it at this area. We seem to have a little bit of a shelf sort of defending this 101.50. If we can break down under, then we certainly have space towards that 101 and then 100 area. But again, same thing, right? We're at 104 here pre-market. So by the time we get to that 101.50 and break down, it's already moved 3%. So need to be a little bit cautious that we're not chasing something that's a little bit exhausted by the time it makes sort of lower lows. Nvidia is kind of looking a bit more like that Microsoft and that AMD, albeit still not exactly a strong candle, right? We still kind of have that upper pressure sort of pushing this thing up a little bit. So I want to be a bit cautious here this AM. If this thing can break down under this 238.60, then it certainly has some room towards that 237, 235, 234 areas, but we're not seeing that huge sign of relative strength in either direction. Probably need a little bit more information before we can feel like we're going to get that sort of trending breakdown or breakout here today. And then last but not least is sort of this Facebook, where it gave us a really relative strong candle profile compared to some of these other names, right? Normal body bearish candle, but it has that sort of weak volume profile. So compared to sort of Nvidia, right? Compared to sort of QQQ, compared to sort of all of our sort of other leading names, Facebook's volume yesterday was sort of the most disappointing of sort of all our looks. So we'd like to maybe wait for this thing, right? This is a look to enter at a stop loss type setup, and we're looking for a breakdown under that 221.50 for a move towards that 220, 219, and then eventually that 218 area. So that's how I plan on dominating today's action. If you guys like this video, please like and subscribe. If you want to follow my day trades live, you can start your 7-day trial at daytradinglivestream.com/join. Otherwise, have yourselves a fantastic session and talk to you guys all tomorrow for the next Market Minute.